All right, Sue Long,
Right.
thank you so much for coming down to Has-Beens today.
You're welcome.
If you could let the folks know at home and on the internet, why are you running for Fortuna City Council?
Well, I've been attending city council meetings, planning commission meetings, and all the workshops in Fortuna for over 10 years. And I've brought up a lot of questions. I've, asked for information. I just feel like I participated in all these meetings and done my homework for all these years, and I never had a vote. So if I get elected to the council, at least now I will have a vote, and maybe they will listen to me a little bit more.
I see. And what's your vision for Fortuna? What do you hope to accomplish if elected over the next 4 years?
Well, I think that the city council needs to be fiscally responsible, and they need to realize that every time they okay money to be spent, that it's not their money, it's the citizens of Fortuna's money. And I think there's been a lot of money spent that shouldn't have been spent the last few years. I would like to see some of that change. I would like to see the friendly city actually be friendly towards businesses when they're trying to come in. We've lost businesses that tried Fortuna first and ended up in Arcata, and I'd like to see that change. If somebody comes in and wants business in Fortuna, we need to make it happen somehow, whether it's changing our zoning, whatever it is, we need to make it happen and make them welcome.
Now, Fortuna's had some annexations in recent years and more evidently on the drawing board. Do you think it's Fortuna's destiny to become the biggest city in Humboldt County?
No, we don't have that much room. We're landlocked by the rivers and by the mountains, and we'll never be the biggest city. We don't even want to be the biggest city.
And so as far as these annexations and these plans for new subdivisions, how far do you think can that go or should that go?
Well, according to the new general plan update and the studies that they've done, Fortuna is only going to grow to about 18,000 people max. So, like I say, we're limited by the highways and the mountains and the rivers, and there's just only so much land that can even be developed. So.
Now, there's a common theme in local governments bringing sunshine to the process, more public disclosure, public information. Do you feel like City Hall doesn't communicate well enough with the public? Do you think the city manager has too much authority versus the public and the city council?
Oh boy, you're getting right in there. Personally, and this is not a secret to anyone who watches the meetings, I don't feel like the city council right now is running the show. I feel like the city manager is. And I think that needs to change.
And how would you change that?
You got to hold his feet to the fire. They tell him they want things, they tell him to come up with these things, and it doesn't seem to matter what they tell him. He kind of seems to want to do what he wants to do, and they don't stop him. Someone needs to say, hey, that's not what we asked for. So I'm willing to do that. As unpopular as it may be, that's my plan. So.
And as far as that general plan process, do you think that worked out for the best? Do you think that provides a good roadmap for the future?
No, I am not in favor of the general plan update as it stands right now. They're trying to push it through. They've got meetings scheduled for October 11th and October 25th, and they're trying to get it done before the new council gets in. And most people that I talk to are not happy with it. They're feeling pressured to pass it anyway. They're feeling pressured to go ahead and say it's okay because they've been told several times now at several meetings that it can be amended 4 times a year. So pass it anyway and we'll just amend it. And to me, that is not the answer. If you're not happy with it and it's not what we want, we shouldn't be passing it. We shouldn't have to amend something that we've just paid all this money for. It should be right.
So what would you want to see different about it before it passes?
I haven't actually read it for a long time, but I have read it, and the things that stand out in my mind are some of the regulations from, say, Fish and Game and those kind of things. They can make suggestions, but they don't really have, I don't want to say the power, but they make suggestions. It's not a regulatory thing that you have to do. And the city is starting to want to have, some major setbacks on creeks and all that, which you need something, and you need to protect your creeks somewhat. But basically, to me, that's taking of land, because now you've got all these people who maybe have planned to build and have saved this property for their retirement or whatever. And if they enforce all these setbacks, suddenly they have a worthless piece of property that maybe that was where their dream home was going to be built. And I think there has to be a balance. You just don't take people's property. You have to have a balance, and you have to protect the environment, yes. but we've gone too far one way. And yeah, I work for a developer, but that doesn't really come into play as far as that goes, because we're not talking about that developer's property. We're talking about every person who owns land in Fortuna. It's going to affect them.
Moving on to transportation, not to point fingers at Fortuna, Humboldt County does the same thing, where a lot of the transit dollars that would otherwise go from the state through our gas tax and so forth for mass transit gets diverted to the road building and maintenance fund. Do you think there's an issue where seniors, disabled folks, other folks who depend on the bus to get around really aren't currently adequately served by the bus system that runs through Fortuna? It's really hard to get out of town past even 7 o'clock at night, or certainly on the weekends. Do you think there's an issue there, or do you think those dollars should be spent on the roads?
Well, that's hard. You have to have decent roads in order to get the buses to drive on them, but Fortuna, for the older seniors and people who maybe have medical conditions and they need to get to Eureka for chemotherapy or different issues, it is hard. The Fortuna bus does a great job getting them around town. And I know there's different groups that have been working and trying to form like a volunteer ride thing where you volunteer your time to help seniors get to medical appointments and those kind of things. But yeah, the bus is hard.
As far as public safety, Fortuna is not plagued with a particularly high crime rate. It's a rural area, as you say. However, I have noticed one thing Fortuna and Eureka are doing are these DUI checkpoints, or at least that's what they call them. They get these federal grant monies, Homeland Security, highway safety, and so forth, and they basically pull everybody over at a certain point on the road and sort of papers, please, justify your existence, identify yourself. And it does seem like it results less in DUI busts and more in seizing some poor person's car because their license expired, and then making a poor person effectively poor by taking away their means of getting to work. Do you think these checkpoints are worth the strings attached to these federal grant monies, or would you prefer to see our local law enforcement just out there on the streets doing normal traffic patrol?
I prefer normal traffic control, but I don't drink, so there you go. It's hard because, like you say, you don't want people to lose their cars, now they can't get to work and all that, but on the other hand, I have to pay my registration, and you have to pay your registration, we have to pay our car insurance. I mean, we have to follow all those laws and all those rules. So if they inadvertently get pulled over, and they post those DUIs, it's not a secret where they're going to be. If you're paying attention, it's all over town, you hear about it ahead of time. But I have to follow all those rules and all those laws. So.
Well, the one thing I noted is that when Eureka canceled their most recent checkpoint a couple weeks ago due to the bad weather or something, they ended up getting more DUIs on traffic patrol than they did at the previous checkpoint.
Well, right, because they tell you where it's going to be. So if anybody with any common sense is going to go around it, they're going to avoid it.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Another issue is how the city interacts with its Hispanic population. It's somewhere in the order of 20% of the city, according to the most recent census figures coming out. And yet you don't really see those folks, certainly on the city council or even during public comment at City Hall. Do you think there's a disconnect between the majority of the community and the Hispanic, especially the Spanish-speaking community? And if so, what would you do to try to bridge that?
I don't know that there really is. The kids that I hang out with, my friends' children, they interact with several of those children, so I see them and their families all the time. Nobody goes to the council meetings at City Hall. It's not just the Hispanic community. There's at the most 5 people in the audience, so I don't think that has anything to do with it. The hardest thing with the Hispanic community is when they don't speak English. When you've got your parents at home who only speak Spanish and your kids are trying to learn English, that's really difficult, and it's hard on the schools.
Are the ICE raids, is that the sort of thing you want Fortuna PD spending its public safety resources on?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it seems like I would much prefer them catching the people who are breaking into people's homes and, the people who are selling drugs to the kids, and that kind of thing to me is more important than that, yeah.
One of the other candidates expressed disappointment with the Headwaters Fund set up to compensate for the loss of jobs when Headwaters Forest was basically walled off from further natural resource industry usage. Do you share their concern that Fortuna really hasn't seen much direct benefit from that?
If they've seen it, I don't know where it's come in. I mean, I don't know a lot about that, but basically all I've seen is job losses and people moving. The families are moving out, and the schools, at first they were bursting at the seams, and some of them still are, but you've also seen a lot of the actual families with children relocating so they can support their families. And I have 3 adult children, and I want them to be able to live in Fortuna, and right now that doesn't look possible. There's nothing for them there. So it's my home, and I had always hoped that my kids would live somewhere close to me, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen.
So what do you think you can do, the city can do, to promote the creation of viable living wage jobs in Fortuna?
Well, it goes right back to being business friendly, and when somebody's knocking at our door, we need to open our door and not scare them away or say, well, you can't be here and you can't be there. We need to find them a place where they can be and say, we will work with you and we will figure this out, and we won't take a year to get your permits or, to give you an answer. It's like the bureaucratic red tape is just too much. People, they're coming to your town and they want to provide jobs and make a living and make their home there. Come on, guys. We have to welcome them.
As far as that old mill site, Palco Mill used to be there. It's been pretty deserted for years. There were plans to have some Sacramento area developer come in and build a Lowe's. That seems to have fallen through with the economic crisis. How do you want to see that site developed?
Everybody's asking that question. Do we want a Walmart? Do we want a Home Depot? Do we want a Lowe's? We want something, but it isn't up to a city council to decide what that something is. That something is going to be free enterprise. That something is going to be someone, some corporation, some developer who has an awful lot of money to spend. Because not only do they have to buy that property, they have to clean up that property, they have to build the buildings. There's talk that they have to build an overpass. There's talk that they want to connect the existing Strongs Creek and Redwood Way, all tie into that whole piece of property. Well, in order to do all that, that is going to take one big chunk of money. And, in these times, who has that much money? I would love to see something happen there. Is it going to happen there soon? I don't think so. It's just, it's millions. The property alone is listed for $7 million. And that's not the cleanup. That's not the buildings. That's just a piece of property. So, yeah, I would love to see something happen there, but it doesn't look good, unfortunately.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the voters as they head to the polls on November 2nd?
Well, if any of you have been paying attention for the last 10 years, you know that I am diligent, that I'm faithful, that I'm loyal, and that I ask a lot of questions, and I really want answers to those questions. I want the city to be fiscally responsible. I want to stop hiring all these outside agencies when we have our own staff. And I just want to listen to the citizens of Fortuna and be that voice that I have been all these years, but actually have a vote and have a say in what happens. So with your vote, maybe I will have a vote and maybe it'll make a difference.
Well, Sue Long, thanks so much for coming down to HASME today.
You're welcome.